Well, I'll tell you this. I posted that from a jail cell. So there you go. You probably haven't had many guests
What?
who have said that.
Hello, and welcome to the Next Level Sunday Show. I'm your host, Tim Miller. I'm here with my buddy, Ron Filipkowski. Now, as you know, in the Sunday interviews, we've brought in, some celebrities. We've brought in some folks from, Hollywood. And so I thought it would be an appropriate vehicle to do an interview I've wanted to do for a long time with the Kelly Clarkson of Arvat, the man I call the Kelly Clarkson of Republican voters against Trump. He now has, I don't know, like almost 1 million people following his monitoring and his clipping of the far-right media. He has a backstory, like many of us at the Bulwark, who'd been a Republican. He still has a day job somehow in the midst of doing all this. So I want to talk to Ron about both his life, how he got to here, but also if there's ever an interview where there's somebody who's spending more time in the fever swamps than me, this is it. Ron is living in the fever swamps, literally and figuratively, down there in Florida. So Ron, thanks for being there. Thanks for doing this, bud.
Thank you. I always appreciate it when you make your cameos, when you spend a week listening to Steve Bannon. And yeah, I feel like I have company,
Yeah, that's nice. It's nice. I'm glad I can do that with you. And every time I do it, I'm like, boy, I'm happy I don't have to do this every day like Ron. I just got out of the Candace swamp, and I was like, I need a cigarette and, a few days of watching Bravo after that. But you're doing the Lord's work. For people that don't know, let's just kind of get your backstory, how you got to this. And I'm sure some of these people may not even know they know you. They just see your clips on the internet. I've been wanting to tell you, I had a very prominent national political reporter tell me they have your tweets on text alert. So every time you send something, they get a text message. So your stuff is penetrating at the highest levels. And but for people who don't kind of know who this, whether you're an AI or how you got into their feed, give us just a penny tour of kind of how you ended up, doing the RVAT video and now doing this far right media monitoring.
Yeah, well, I was active in the Republican Party for 30 years. Lots of roles, campaign manager, county, working with the county party, president of the local Republican club, general counsel, serving in all those different roles, and sort of watched how the party evolved. And then, of course, Trump comes along, and I was very much adamantly anti-Trump. I actually supported Marco Rubio in that primary, and there was no way I was ever going to vote for Trump. So basically, when he was elected, which sort of surprised me, I voted none of the above in that race. I completely checked out and paid no attention to politics, paid no attention to the news. I just kind of watched sports and read history books for 4 years or 3 years. And then COVID happened, and that sort of forced me to kind of pay attention. And that's when I really made the RVAT videos, because I saw the commercial for you guys and Lincoln Project's commercials on CNN. And that was the first time it really hit me that, I bet you there's a lot of Republicans like me that are seething in silence over Trump, that are just can't stand the guy, but have never told anybody that, never said anything to anybody. So I made the video as a Republican against Trump, and you guys posted it. And then kind of all hell broke loose where I started getting asked to do a lot of stuff,
Well, and we appreciated that because there's some people like put the video up and it was like a, kind of just cathartic, like they just had to get it out of their system. But then, they didn't want any more heat. And then, there were other folks that did it and like wanted to kind of see this thing through. And you were in the latter camp. So appreciate that. The thing that I remember when I came across our transom, the video that just stood out to me was like how Republican you were. Right. And this,
Yep.
you mentioned, being the head of the Republican club, there were some people, we got some of the people that were like that, but who submitted, but, that was kind of rare. But I mean, the one anecdote that always jumped out at me was that you named your child Ronald Reagan Filipkowski. That is true.
Absolutely.
That is true.
Yeah. And I wanted to name my second one Winston Churchill, but that was where my wife kind of drew the line and said, absolutely not. But I did get the first one as Ronald Reagan. Yes. So, that's how Republican
that gives people credibility. When they hear that in the ad, they're like, okay, this guy was serious about his business. All right. This was not a rhino.
It was always my intention to run for Congress, someday. And that was sort of what I was gearing up to do. I interned in the legislature. I was a Marine. I was a state prosecutor, federal prosecutor, director of the police academy here. So I checked every box going up the line. But really what it was, Tim, for me was I had 5 kids and I was coaching all their teams. And I just sort of decided like, I would rather do that than the chicken dinner circuit and do all the things you need to do to get elected. And second was the fundraising part of it. Just, I never liked it. I hated it. I hated asking people for money. And so those two things combined sort of led me to decide like, I'm not going to run for anything.
Okay, so then Joe Biden wins. Many people like you it would be rational to be like, all right, I've got a law business. I can go back to that. I've got, they're always grandkids, teams to coach, whatever it is, like other things to happen. So what then turned you into saying, okay, we've done this, we got rid of him, but I'm going to spend all day, watching War Room with Steve Bannon and sending out these clips.
To be honest with you, probably Rudy Giuliani's press conference with Sidney Powell was what did it. Yeah. My plan was I got on Twitter for 2 months, before the election. And I just said, I'm just going to get on here to try and convince, only thing I was doing was trying to convince moderate Republicans to vote for Biden. That was it. Yeah. My intention was to quit Twitter the day after the election. But then, when it became obvious to me and that anybody who knows Trump that he was not going to concede, which was obvious months ahead of time, I knew he wasn't going to concede. So I said, well, I'll stick with it until he concedes. And then the Rudy press conference happened. And that's when I literally drove off the Sunshine Skyway. I literally was on the Sunshine Skyway when he came on and started talking about Hugo Chavez and the Italian satellites, drove off the road and just started live tweeting on the side of the highway because I just couldn't believe it. And that's when I sort of really go, where are they getting this stuff from? And that's when I delved into the whole, QAnon right-wing conspiracy world and followed that world into the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers right up through January 6th. Saw all of the planning, saw them, and it just really shocked me what the Republican Party had become at that grassroots level that I hadn't been a part of in 5 years, but to watch what it had been from when I left all of that stuff in 16 to 20, what it was in 2021 was like night and day. And it scared the hell out of me. And I determined at that point, defeating Trump is not going to defeat this movement. The movement itself has to be defeated,
So what were you thinking on the morning of January 6th? I mean, you'd spent all the time, reading the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys stuff. I mean, do you feel like you saw it coming? I felt like a lot of people a lot of people were caught off guard.
Look, there's a lot of people now a lot of people now who claim they saw what's coming, but they didn't. I always say, show me the proof. I got the tweets to prove it. So, yeah, I mean, I knew it was I was plugged into a lot of independent journalists that were in there at the time. There's a whole bunch of them on Twitter that were embedded in that crowd that I was following their live feeds with 2 other people, and we were just recording everything. But yeah, I knew because I had been following all the Oath Keepers stuff. I would be following Joe Biggs, following the Proud Boys guys, Enrique Terrio. I watched them say, we're going to bring the bear spray and we're going to wear the body armor and we're going to wear disguises. I had absolutely no doubt in my mind there was going to be violence. I didn't know that they were going to breach the Capitol. I thought that they would be stopped trying to do that. I didn't know that they would actually get inside. But I knew all about the Eastman stuff, the Michael Flynn stuff, all of that stuff before it happened. I saw it being planned.
So when did all of your stuff start taking off? As far as the monitoring, and it was after that, was monitoring of the media or monitoring of kind of the more of the grassroots stuff that was happening on the right.
It really was grassroots. See, because other people monitored the media. There's plenty of guys that clip Fox News and Newsmax.
Sure.
And what I found was that's not really what drives this movement. What drives the movement are the influencers and the podcasters and the social media people. they've really taken over that MAGA movement. It's not Fox News. Matter of fact, most of them don't even watch Fox News at all. The only thing that they watched was Tucker, and since he's gone, they don't even watch Fox. So I found that like people who clip Fox were not really helpful to me in understanding the movement. So when I really burrowed in and started following guys like, Michael Flynn and Roger Stone and Kash Patel and all these other people, Tim Pool,
Their
you
Telegram feeds,
all that stuff. That's when it really opened my eyes to what is really happening in the party, and it's not the party that you and I grew up in. That's for sure.
Now, what does the people in your life have to feel like you've gone a little crazy? I mean, I just it is on the surface. Like I said, so I went down to visit you briefly. We had the circus was in town, and we had a version of this kind of conversation that I wanted to do in longer form. But I get a little vision into your life, and you're still doing some lawyering. You're in a red part of the state.
Very much.
Obviously your friend group was a family pretty Republican. They must think that you've lost your mind.
Yeah, it's not really something I talk about with my family very much. My sons are Trump supporters. So yeah, it's my daughter is. I have one child who's not, and she's the only one I talk to.
It's usually the inverse. This is an interesting counter to like the story of that you see of like, the avocado toast eating millennial who's like, my parents' brains have been rotted by Tucker. You hear that a lot, but like this is the opposite. I'm trying to imagine like this bizarro world where your sons and your daughter are like, my father's brain has been rotted by the Bulwark. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so you guys you're just trying not to, you have to have some people that are trying to be like, hey man, take a breath.
Yeah, I think they chalk it up to like a Trump derangement syndrome kind of thing, that it's all about Trump, and I get accused of that by the right wingers, all the time, but it's really not it. Trump is like a circus clown to me a lot of the time. The people around Trump are way worse than him, I think. The people in his ear. So no, it's an entire political movement that's hijacked the party at the local. I look what it's done to our county party here, and I'm disgusted. I'm just horrified. That these crazy people that used to sit in the corner and grumble are now in charge. And that's happened all over the country. So really what I see is like, it's this entire movement that's become just this huge, incredible threat to the country. So yeah, I think we're in a very bizarre time. And, my fifth child went off to college. So I think that's why I just kind of dove into it. Plus I also felt that no one else was properly covering these people. I really felt that way. Mainstream media, I felt like the leaders of the parties didn't understand what's happening. They didn't understand these people. They didn't understand the movement. So I felt there was a great need for somebody who really understood these people to communicate it to people who didn't.
Yeah. I feel that way too. I mean, when was the wake up call for you on that? Because obviously Trump winning was a bit of a wake up call, but there's an element to you're talking about the clownishness of Trump, right? There's this element to that's like, well, I get it. Some people liked him from The Apprentice, and they don't follow things closely. They're casuals. Like that was different than realizing, oh, okay, actually. The story that is told in the mainstream media, the story that's told on Fox, about the party is not actually the right one. And what is and for me, it took to actually traveling out there and doing the circus stuff and seeing people, seeing people, and then doing some of the media deep dives. I kind of recognized like, there is a very large energy out there that wants something that's much, much darker than this. And it is not just, the fact that these are kind of casual people that think that Trump is funny. There is an element of that. Like Trump has that appeal to a certain group of, barstool bros, but like there's another deeply sinister thing that's taken over kind of from the bottom up. So like, was it during that period between the election and January 6th, or do you remember some inflection points on that where you kind of realized how strong that part of the movement is?
And I'll answer that, but I'll go back to what you just said. So yesterday, actually, I talked to somebody with the Trump campaign, and he said to me something I've actually said in the past, which I thought was very insightful from him, which was, he said, Ron, the exact things that you guys hate about Trump are the exact things that we love about Trump. All the misogyny, the homophobia, the gangsterness, the mob stuff, the brash stuff, those are the exact traits that that attract them. Yeah. So when we look at those traits and we say, oh, these are horrible things, like how can anybody like Trump when he's like this? That's exactly the reason they do like Trump. And that's what you have to sort of understand to get your hands around it. But as far as like moments,
that's very different. Just, I want to go back to the moments. So that's just very different. It's insightful because it's very different than like the conventional wisdom about Trump about a lot of people. And I think even in the mainstream media, a lot of people in like the big cities who can't wrap their head around that, right? In the donor class, in the Republican strategist class, the conventional wisdom is like, oh, they kind of, it's like the tweets are the problem, right? Like the old line about like, oh, but the tweets, right? Like if it's just, you just send some mean tweets, and it's like, that voters like kind of like the fact that he was good on conservative policies, and that they like him in spite of the tweets, and that is just a totally wrong assessment of what.
If you're at a Trump rally, when they get electrified and loud, it's when he says the worst possible stuff from a human perspective. Yep. The lower he goes into the gutter, the more excited they get. It's literally, that's why I think he loves UFC and wrestling so much. It's literally like that atmosphere. Like the worse carnage it gets, the uglier it gets, the more the crowd loves it. Or a boxing match, And I think that there's no coincidence that those are all Trump's favorite sporting events to attend. Are events like that, No,
we did an interview earlier a couple of months ago with somebody that wrote a book about Vince McMahon, and it's very insightful into the mindset of Trump. Like there's definitely
they're very tight
there. Yeah,
they're good buddies. Yeah. Dana White, of course, and Trump are very tight. So from the UFC, so the moment I would say is the moment when all the January 6th leaders like Flynn and others, Patrick Byrne and all these guys, they sort of went underground for like 3 or 4 months after January 6th and kept their heads down and their mouths shut. I think because they were all thinking like they were about to be arrested any day. Mm-hmm. They didn't know what was going to go down. And then I think when they felt like it didn't, and when all of them resurfaced and started forming groups, organizations, these, reawakened tours, and started doing and getting podcasts, that was the moment that sort of triggered it for me. And when they started organizing people to go into like school board meetings, and throughout the summer of 2021, I would say that's when I really went all in, when I saw like, this stuff is never going to end. It's only going to get worse. Trump could drop dead tomorrow and these people aren't going away,
Yeah, this was the same time that I did the Lynn Wood profile, and I went to South Carolina. And it was interesting, and I could understand, and it gave me a really good insight into like these two realities of the Republican world, where you have kind of the donor class and the party leaders, and how they convince themselves, that they still have control of the reins, which is obviously insane to any of us that are looking at this stuff. But I saw Lynn Wood at a event in Columbia, which is the capital of South Carolina, with the political class.
He was running for state party chair.
He was running for state party chair at the time, yeah.
Right.
And he was like like they treated him like a leper, right, at this meeting in South Carolina. Right? Like it was all the old timey South Carolina, the Henry McMaster crowd, the old timey South Carolina class that's been around forever, was at this state central committee meeting. Then there was another meeting about an hour outside of Columbia that happened the next day, and there Lynn was like a rock, like Harry Styles, like a rock star, like people.
I think it was the Bikers for Trump.
You remember that? Exactly.
It. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So those back to back to me, I was just like, oh my God, right? Like there was this like quasi-genteel, group of old establishment Republicans that think that they have like control of the snake, and then you go see the snake the next day, and you're like, you guys like have no like are totally swamped. The energy of this other group, how crazy they are, like the things that they believe. And I talked to Lynn after one of them, and and he's had a huge fall from grace since then. But you could kind of see the glimmer in his eye about kind of recognizing like kind of the power of the crazy train.
Well, you see that same glimmer in Steve Bannon. You watch him enough.
Right. Yeah.
You know that half the stuff he says, he doesn't believe himself.
Yeah,
And
right.
you could tell because he gets that glimmer in his eye and he gets that little smile where he's kind of like winking at you going, I know this is all bullshit, but these people love it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to just talk about what's happened in the race and what you've learned from from watching all this. But I just want to do a little bit before I do. Like, again, about your life and you're in Florida. Do you feel safe? Do you have safety concerns? I mean, I worry about you a little bit sometimes. I mean, you're recognizable at this point. That mug is right there on the Twitter feed. Is anybody throwing tomatoes at you on the street?
When I first got on Twitter, I was anonymous, like a lot of people. And I think I decided after like 2 months, I'm like, I can't do this anonymously. Like, I just felt like putting your name on the account is a lot more effective and impactful. That you're willing, because people know who you are and they could see your background. But I knew when I did that, what was going to happen. I was at that time, a DeSantis appointee, till I resigned. So to a commission. So yeah, I knew what that meant. I knew that I was going to be ostracized locally in the party. I knew I was going to get threats. I was going to lose friends. And that all happened. I knew when I did the RVAT video, I thought about it for like 3 days because I knew the implications of that. And there was a lot. Look, I look around when I get in my car every day now, and I never did that in my life. But yeah, you're definitely concerned. I live in the same town as Michael Flynn's brother, a lot of right wingers. The headquarters of Trump media is here. I've seen Devin Nunes in town. I've seen Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro.
Where is the headquarters of that? Are you talking about the Truth Social, the Truth Social thing?
The headquarters of that is about 3 miles from where I'm sitting right now. It's
where
in
is
Sarasota.
that? In Sarasota.
In Sarasota.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot. This used to be a 50-50 very artsy community split right down the middle.
Yeah.
It is now MAGA country, this county.
Yeah. And I mean, are there, and that kind of the MAGA crowd, like, are you recognizable at this point, or are you at such it's kind of interesting. When I go to the Turning Point USA things, like, the only people that recognize me are kind of more of the high class MAGA people because they're like intellectually curious enough to like turn on MSNBC sometimes, right? Like the real mouth breathers don't really recognize me because they're not, I'm just not they're like in a hermetically sealed bubble of crazy, right? And so is that your kind of?
No, the problem is they all know me, because a lot of them follow me on Twitter. I mean, because the reality is I think I cover them better than anyone on their side. So they get a lot of their information about what's going on in their own movement from me. So yeah, a lot of them know. I talk to some of them. I communicate with them. So yeah, I think I'm definitely more recognizable. I used to be able to go to events all the time, like rallies and stuff, but I feel like I probably can't anymore. I get invited all the time. I was invited by Roger Stone to one where he offered to let me.
Why are they communicating with you?
No, they just want to kill me, really.
Oh.
They don't really want me to go. I mean, they just want to lure me probably to something. But no, why do I talk to them, or why do they talk to me?
Why do they talk to you?
Yeah, I think for right now it's all about DeSantis, and I think I had probably the most effective anti-DeSantis account on Twitter for a couple of years now, where I'm just relentlessly hammering away at DeSantis. So I think that a lot of the paid Trump people on social media sort of looked at me like a useful resource for them.
Does that make you uncomfortable? Does that make you uncomfortable? Because I wonder I think about that stuff sometimes too, about how to deal with that world.
You have to keep them at arm's length, and there's varying degrees of crazy amongst them. Some of them are way out there. I'll talk to anybody. Look, I've been a criminal lawyer for 28 years. So I've represented murderers, drug traffickers, armed robbers, you name it. I've represented some pretty bad people. So talking to somebody who I don't especially like is quite easy for me to do. And I can separate out my personal feelings about that person from the task at hand. But like I sent you something yesterday, that's somebody who works for Trump, and literally like he tweeted something that I had said to him earlier in the day, but he put it out as his tweet. So I think that shows the usefulness of it to me, in that, a lot of them aren't going to listen to me, but they've just heard my words from somebody that they like and respect who works for Donald Trump. So that's useful to me.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's kind of like, God, because I grapple with this, because I hear from them too. They want to use me for there's certain types of things that a Trump person can't criticize a DeSantis person for, a DeSantis person can't criticize a Trump person for. I had somebody, there was a big, it actually ended up, I think, working out for the best. There was a big Breitbart takeout on a unracist material that a DeSantis person had sent out that I had seen that before. But I was like, I don't want to get it. You know what I mean? I'm in a box on both your houses place. And so sometimes I was like, I don't want you guys using me. Sometimes you can be useful to me, but sometimes it's a nice edge on who's getting used and who's using,
Yeah, I mean, they use my stuff against DeSantis. I mean, that's pretty much it. I never criticize Democrats, so it's not like I'm giving them anything on Joe Biden, know. But they do use a lot of my DeSantis material, and I use a lot of theirs. So I think that they like it that I'm more mainstreaming some fringy people on the right. Because, look, they might find a clip of DeSantis that no one else has. So just because I'm getting it from a right-wing way out there nutcase, it's still a clip, Yeah,
it happened. So you're not just, I'm a little worried about you though. Are you just sitting in your basement all alone? Like you have outlets still, you're getting sun in Florida, you're able to leave your house and like socialize and stuff. The amount of material that you're putting out, is pretty prolific. So, I'm just checking in on you. Mental health check on Ron.
Yeah, well, I can say the vacation I just took was 9 days with no internet and at the insistence of my wife. And that was a really good thing to sort of decompress and get away. So, you definitely need that. But I don't know. I'm a grinder. I'm just good at just being very relentless and very obsessive. And so, I mean, I'm pretty much from the moment I wake up, 6 a.m., till then I have to start work, of course. So I'm a practicing lawyer. Like last week, I did a 5-day drug trafficking jury trial. All last week, 5 days. And I tweeted right through it. I had like 20 viral tweets last week during a drug trafficking trial. So there you go. It's all about compartmentalization, right?
To you, I mean, that's insane though. You're like breaking national news. You've got like famous, like I saw Andy Roddick's retweeting you last week. You're doing this like while you're in the middle of a trial. I mean, like what are your sleeping hours?
Like 10:30 to 6. I mean,
That's not bad.
I get a little sleep. Yeah. No,
doesn't seem like you have time for much else. I guess it's just the fever swamps
really
and lawyer.
Efficient. I'm efficient. I know where to go to get stuff.
Do you have, as a member of the jury, ever been like, "Hey, I saw your tweet." I don't want to get you in trouble.
No, honestly, that's probably another reason why I'm leaving the practice of law soon, and which I am doing. And that's one of the reasons is because there have been occasions where I've gone in front of judges who I know don't like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And there have been occasions I've gone in front of judges who I know do like it. And same thing with juries. I mean, there very well could be people on that jury who say that they don't know me in jury selection, but they do, and they hate me.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to hurt any of my clients, my involvement in politics. So it's definitely a factor. I feel like I've been doing law for 28 years. I want to transition over into politics full time, and that's what I'm about to do.
It is a modern story, huh? Like country lawyer becomes influencer. I feel like we could do a Christmas special on Hallmark about about this, or
No,
a
but
30 Rock
no,
episode or something.
it's it's interesting because that you say that, because I just thought about this the other day. I was thinking, without social media in the modern world, which really is like, it has many horrors, but it also has some positives in that it's a pure meritocracy. Because I was thinking, like, under the old school politics, you would have had to come up to ever get invited to be a guest on TV, or to do anything, or to talk to a Washington Post reporter about
Yeah,
politics like I do every day. You would have had to have gone up through the ranks and had a number of titles, and you would have had to have been campaign manager for this congressperson. I'm not any of that stuff. It's just, I think, just the work and the content I just put out with no titles, with nobody knew who I was, with the work itself that I did stood on its own. And I think that, that could not have happened 10 years ago.
no,
I
this
could
is
not
a
have.
rant I always do about how people say that free speech is in greater threat than ever. I'm like, it's crazy. I was like, in your case, it has been for good, but there are
Yeah.
plenty of other cases where people are evil or insane and have become famous beyond their wildest imaginations. And these are the people you monitor, like
Well,
on TikTok
like
and on Twitter, on social media, on YouTube. And in the old world, they would have been screaming at clowns on street corners with megaphones, or like writing letters to the editor, calling into Rush, or Rush didn't take calls, but calling
yep.
into, hoping their local talk radio jockey would like let them on the phone for 90 seconds. There is that, and that is kind of the
There's
dark
the
side
other
of the coin.
side.
But I like you like pointing out that that it is true that like somebody that really wants to make a difference and have their voice be heard, like if you want to be a freak like Ron and grind out 12 hours a day while you're doing a drug trial, like you can do it if you have something to say and a passion. I think that's cool.
Yeah, and you have the talent, the ability too. I mean, you can't
Right.
just be an idiot. But yeah, you take people like, the other side of the reverse side of the coin is guys like Philip Buchanan, who's cat turd, Jack Posobiec, people like
Yeah.
that are fall into that category where without social media, no one would know who they were.
Yeah. Okay. I want to get into 2024. Last psychological question for you, though. Your wife, though, you mentioned her. She's okay. She's not worried about you. She doesn't need to call me, like write me any letters. She doesn't. She's handling, the target on your back. Okay. I guess it's probably no different than having clients that may or may not, that were alleged to have done bad things.
Yeah.
So I guess she's
Yeah.
used to it by now.
She's definitely used to a certain element of crazy in my life. I mean, we
Yeah.
haven't talked about all the stuff that I've done, but yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of wild stuff. And so I think she's just used to rolling with the punches at this
All right.
point.
Well, she needs a drink in New Orleans. You can send her my way because
Okay.
she's you're putting her through it. Or maybe it's nice. She's like, hey, I get the days to myself now. Ron's down in the basement for the last 2 hours. He's been monitoring a live stream on Jack Posobiec's Telegram feed. Anyway, when we talked for the circus, I thought you were so early and so correct, and have been proven so correct about this. This was maybe, I guess it was before the midterms, so maybe last October was when we came down to Sarasota, me and Heilman, to talk to you. And he was asking you about 24. And your assessment was basically, it's just Trump and DeSantis. It's just like the people, MAGA voters, are not interested in anybody else. I wrote an article this week called, there's two primaries: there's a real primary and imaginary primary. The real primary is what the voters who are going to vote in the primary actually care about. The imaginary primary is what the donors, the talking heads on TV talk about. And in the real primary, from my vantage point, it's Trump, it's DeSantis, but increasingly less so. It's Vivek, increasingly more so, and RFK Jr. is running in the wrong party. They love him too. So that was my take. But I would like for you, since you're spending more time in that world, to grade me on that, and just to kind of give your sense for, how your average the MAGA world is seeing the primary as of right now, kind of July 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, I read your column. I mean, it's pretty much just Trump now. I mean, I watched DeSantis' interview this morning where he talked about an electoral college path now. It always seems like whenever you start crunching math state by state, that means you're in trouble, because, whenever you're like, well, I know, I think he's already written off New Hampshire.
It's the old Rubio thing. He's like, we're going to get a bronze in New Hampshire and then silver in South Carolina. And then we'll get a gold. Okay. Yeah.
And then momentum will build. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the argument that he's making. I think he's written off New Hampshire. He's counting on his relationship with Kim Reynolds to bail him out in Iowa. And then he's laying a ton of ground. He's spending a ton of time in South Carolina these days. And I think he's going to move to South Carolina probably. He's really banking on that. So that's his plan. And he thinks maybe he could have a good showing in South Carolina, win Iowa, and get some momentum. But look here, I mean, from a grassroots
from the media, Talk about. I'm interested in both your take from the grassroots standpoint and the media talking head standpoint, because take the grassroots first, and then we'll get to the media.
I truly believe that he thought he was going to be able to win over a big chunk of the MAGA base, and this is, I think, what I said to you guys when I was here was that's completely the wrong strategy, and that will never ever happen. For this reason, he thought he would win them over with policy and with his record. And the MAGA base doesn't love Donald Trump for those things. They love Donald Trump for the things we hate about Donald Trump. And when you look at it through that prism, you can see his strategy was, I'm going to show the MAGA base that I'm Trump who can get things done. I have all these policy positions that are far right positions, and I've implemented them in Florida. Trump is all over the place on policy, and he accomplished nothing. He got none of it through Congress. So that was the argument that he was going to make to the MAGA base. The problem with that is that's a rational argument, and they're not rational people. And so he can't connect with them on a level of why they love Trump, which is the personality, and he doesn't have that. So what he did is he went after MAGA with that argument. That blew up in his face. He didn't get any of them. So now where is he? He's been out on the far right ledge for months now. So what is he going to do? Try and go get those mainstream establishment voters now with the completely retooled message and retooled campaign? I guess I listened to his interview today. It was 1 hour. He didn't use the word woke one time. Not once. Now, compare that to 2 months ago where he would use it 30 times in an interview. So the message is clearly being retooled.
We're taping this on Wednesday, and so the interview you're talking about today is the Clay Travis interview. The one
that's right.
Clip, not knowing that this interview is going to happen, just showing the reach of Ron. Right before we got on, the Bulwark Slack is blowing up with one clip from the interview, which you put out of him telling Clay that he wouldn't consider RFK for VP, but he would consider him for head of FDA or CDC should he be willing to serve. An absolutely insane view to put an anti-vax person in there. So talk about that.
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you this. I posted that from a jail cell. So there you go. You probably haven't had many guests who have said that.
Okay, wait. How does that work? You post that from a jail cell.
I was in the county jail a couple hours ago, waiting to visit a client of mine on some very serious charges, and I listened to that was listening to that interview, sitting in the holding cell, waiting for my client to be brought in, and I posted. It took a long time for that to post inside the jail because it's like not great internet service, but it went through and it actually posted while I was talking to my client in a jail cell.
But that shows, that's hilarious. That shows that he still hasn't figured out how to navigate this two-pronged problem that you're talking about, right? Which is like, I need to get the MAGA people, but I need to seem serious. And so I'm like, I'm going to try to split the baby by saying, well, this crazy anti-vaxxer, I wouldn't make him VP, but I might put him in charge of vaccines, like for the federal government. Like what?
Him and Trump and all the Republican candidates keep getting asked about RFK Jr. because they know that the MAGA base does love RFK Jr. They absolutely do. If you monitor the right wing across multiple platforms, it's been positive RFK Jr. stuff for 3 years now. Since COVID started, he's been a folk hero to them. So these candidates keep getting asked about RFK and what they think of him and whether they would choose him as a running mate. So yeah, DeSantis got the obligatory question. And typical DeSantis, he tries to find the middle way somehow to placate that base, but he won't go full crazy by saying he would choose him as a running mate. So instead he throws out this, we might choose him for CDC director. Now, do I believe DeSantis would ever make RFK Jr. CDC director? No. It's a clear pander. But I think, what does the donor class think when they hear that?
Is he really that much crazier than Ladopo or whatever that guy's name is that he named as Surgeon General?
That's a good point. I mean, maybe you're right. Yeah. But what does the donor class think, the Republican donor class think when they hear he might make RFK Jr. CDC director?
Yeah, but they pulled her out. And this is where, going back to our point about how you in living that world now understand, you understand the movement better than the Republican donor class does. You understand the movement. It was just yesterday the National Review was mad at the Bulwark because we were accusing them and other people on the right of basically being pro RFK Jr. and how the right wing media has become pro RFK Jr. and how even the more normal right wing media has now tempers their criticism of him because they know that because the readers like him, and your observation is exactly that the politicians have to pander to him because that's what the movement is. The movement wants the anti-vax kook. That's what they want, and the National Review guys don't. They don't deign to live in the world that you live in and understand what's really happening.
Yeah, I mean, Trump and DeSantis are going at each other constantly over who was worse on COVID, and the worst one wins. I mean, who is more anti-Fauci, who is more anti-science, who is more throw everything open wins in a Republican primary right now. So
what is
yeah.
Yeah, what is your sense?
I mean, him throwing out RFK Jr. sort of ratchets it up on Trump. Now, it'd be interesting to see what Trump has to say about that.
Me and JVL have been saying RFK is a leading contender for VP for a while now. Okay, for Trump. But I want an interesting development that you're maybe the best person possible to ask about this question because it's it's tough for me to kind of gauge there was a period where the MAGA influencer class was pretty DeSantis curious, in a way more so than really they were for anybody in 2016, right? He was doing better among, some of the ex-Trump staffers who had become influencers, like the Jenna Ellises of the world, the Daily Wire crowd, that kind of the MAGA media crowd, not Fox. We know that he's been good with Fox, but he kind of penetrated into the MAGA influencer and media world pretty well early. What are those people doing now? Is that starting to dissipate, or are they flailing? What's your sense for that?
No, I mean, look, the flirtation was they're looking for a successor to Trump eventually. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were all pretty strong. We love DeSantis. We think he's great. This was prior to him announcing. We think he's great. We love him. We want him to run in 2028, or we want him to be Trump's running mate, which would never happen. But we want him to be Trump's running mate, or we want him to run in 2028. But they all had the caveats, But if he tries to run against Trump, then he's being a disloyal piece of shit, and we're out. So I think that he really, really fundamentally shot himself in the foot here. He's 46? If he had just kept his mouth shut or backed Trump or whatever, you didn't even have to campaign for him, and just run in 2028, it just seems like everything was there for him. But and in terms of being the heir apparent, but I truly believe, and not enough people have talked about this, I believe that Ron DeSantis is running against Donald Trump partially out of spite, because Trump constantly reminds DeSantis and the public over and over again, DeSantis would be nothing without me. DeSantis would be working at a Pizza Hut without me, he said, or working at a fast food place. He'd be nowhere. He'd be nothing. I made him. And if you know Ron DeSantis' personality, he cannot handle things like that. Look, Disney dared to criticize one of his policies, and he's dismantling a 50-year-old, precedent with them. So if you poke him, if you jab, look, he removed an elected state attorney because he said he wouldn't arrest women for getting an abortion. I mean, that's Ron DeSantis. So I believe partially what's behind DeSantis's run is the fact that he is pissed off that Trump won't leave him alone about the fact that he made him who he is today. So,
what about my? So you seem to dismiss my sense that there's a little bit of Vivek Momentum in the MAGA world.
No.
You're not feeling that.
I think that I think you know this if you look historically, that Republican presidential candidates of color always poll higher than their vote totals. And I think the reason for that is because Republicans who are talking to pollsters like to say, sure, I like the black guy, or I like the Indian guy, or this Latino guy. But when they get in the voting booth, they don't vote for him.
Yeah.
So, and I think we've seen this with so many candidates, whether it's Ben Carson or Larry Elder, time and time again, they poll better than their vote totals. And I think with Vivek, look, I think part of it too is the influencer class ignored him and didn't pay much attention to him and lightly praised him. But now he's gotten their attention for the first time, and they're turning on him now. Now they are
saw the
training their
anti-Hindu
guns on
stuff
him.
just
And they're
yesterday.
digging up all. They just posted a rap video that he did in college where he was doing Eminem on the stage. They just put that out. Look, the Trump.
It was really bad. We might have to we'll put the video in the show notes for people. I have to admit I clicked on that because I was intrigued and I was hoping that he was going to be good, and he was very offbeat. Like I was like, I think I could have done a better Lose Yourself karaoke than this. I was hoping my expectations were not met. That's all I want to say. So, but anyway, yeah. And then
but he's a guy who's been all over the place on issues over the last 15 years, and they're starting to go dig that stuff up and put it out where they, how that works. I mean, they kind of ignored him for a while, but now they're going to train their guns on him, and a lot of stuff's going to come out that is not good.
Yeah, this shows you where the Republican primary is. That Vivek and that DeSantis is worried about Vivek and Tim Scott on his heels, as he should be. And so just in the last week, we've seen two pieces of oppo come out. The oppo on Vivek is that he's Hindu, actually, and he's not admitting it enough in Iowa. You saw this in DeSantis' world yesterday. And on Tim Scott, it was that he had a quote about like 20 years ago about how the Republican Party like didn't understand the black experience, and like this. He didn't use the word systemic racism. I don't have the quote in front of me, but it was like, it was a synonym of systemic racism, really, that he was arguing about 20 years ago. And now you're starting to see this quote pop up. And it's like acknowledging that racism is a problem and not being a white evangelical Christian are the pieces of oppo. Like that tells you a lot about where the state of play.
Yeah. The guy to watch is Byron Donalds in this discussion because the congressman from Florida, because they
nominated him, just for viewers, that he was the guy that the Freedom Caucus put up as a patsy to be the speaker, because they didn't want McCarthy. And so they're like, who is your alternative? And they're like, oh, we're going to put up Byron Donalds, and, not so subtly bring up the fact that, we're also nominating a black man and we're not racist. Anyway, so there was that element to it. But anyway, go ahead.
I think that the MAGA movement has embraced him as somebody, in Congress that's a person of color more than anybody else. They love Byron Donalds. I cannot find any person in the MAGA movement who doesn't like him, and they all want him to be Trump's running mate. Now, I don't think that necessarily works. I mean, there's some electoral college issues when you're from the same state, which I'm sure it can.
He's also young.
It can present an issue.
He's also young, isn't he? He's also really young.
He's very young. I don't think he will be, but I mean, he's definitely a rising star to keep an eye on, and somebody who is universally liked in the movement. So Tim Scott, on the other hand, no, I mean they don't take Tim Scott seriously. He's a guy that they think he's a decent guy. He's a nice guy. They like him. They respect his background, but they're not going to vote for him.
Byron's actually 44. I was older than like almost as old as DeSantis.
He's a guy to watch.
DeSantis looks terrible though. So there's it doesn't seem like they're only 2 years apart. What else are you watching out there? On the one thing I don't do is I don't truth social. I don't want to have it on my phone. I don't care. But occasionally I see Trump's crazy bleats come across my screen, sometimes from you. Like what else? What's something that people who are not in that world might not realize as far as kind of the messaging they're starting to employ, or, some latest crazy conspiracy theory, anything that's caught your eye?
I mean, all the Hunter Biden stuff is pretty wild. They're so banking on this one witness who was supposed to, I'm drawing a blank on his name, who was supposed to testify Monday and backed out again for the third time.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I have to pause. We're going to go back to Hunter Biden. Sebastian just came through. DeSantis is only 44. He looks really bad 44. For 44. That makes me feel bad about how close, like we're like peers, me and Ron DeSantis. He needs to moisturize. I'm sorry, go ahead. That was a little news item. For some reason, I thought he was older than that. Okay, continue, Ron.
Yeah, I mean, the Hunter Biden stuff I've been following since, Rudy first rolled it out in 2020. I saw all of it back then. And, my advice, I saw all the laptop stuff and all these platforms. And my advice has always been the same to Democrats, which is, please do not try and defend Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden did a lot of bad stuff, did a lot of shady stuff. He was out of his mind on drugs. He clearly he was using at that time his father's name to get money, and I don't think that Joe knew about it. I don't think that Joe was involved in any way, but Hunter, clearly that was his game. And so I don't like when Democrats go out of their way to sort of defend Hunter Biden, because they just don't know the truth about a lot of the crap that he was doing. So I think that what Democrats' energy needs to be is focused on separating Joe from Hunter, even though for whatever reason, Joe will not allow that to happen physically. Yeah. He continues to have Hunter at the White House and around him, which drives me crazy right now. I don't think that that's good optics in the middle of trying to run for re-election, but I get that he's his son, but I just don't think he should be in the White House. But this star witness that they've been hyping for months and months and months, this was the third time he was supposed to testify, was this past Monday, and he backed out again. And this is the guy who's supposedly Hunter's business partner, who who overheard a phone call where Hunter put his dad on speakerphone with someone in Ukraine, and
this story is such a nothing. This story is such a nothing. So the Hunter stuff I find interesting, and I'm pretty diligent about reading all the Hunter stories, because I want to know. I don't want to be out there making arguments that's not true. I agree with you. I think Hunter's done a lot of bad, shady stuff, and it's always best to have full information awareness, of vulnerabilities, and if Biden did something that he shouldn't have, I'll say it. But like this phone call story, like Devin Archer is the guy name just came to me. It's like, it's nothing. It's literally like Hunter is in Ukraine, even on face value. Like, this might not be true, right? But like, even if this guy's claim is true, it's like Hunter is in Ukraine with some oligarchs at Burisma, and Devin Archer is there, and he says that Hunter calls his dad and puts him on speakerphone, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm here with Oleg and whatever," and Joe's like, "Yeah, great, hey, good to see you, Jack." Then he hangs up. Like, that's the story, and it's like, okay,
that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, it's like, it's like, oh, okay, great. Dad answers son's phone call and like gives nice pleasantries, and then like they hang up. It's like, that's what you got. I was like, come back to me when you got something better. I think that they're going to really go after this dog.
Here's what do you? Here's what the sum total. All the information that they have is whether it's emails, text messages, whatever, phone calls, is all Hunter bragging about how much influence he has over his dad.
Right.
The problem is you never have anything proving that he ever did have any influence.
Right.
You never have anything back from Joe saying, yes, son, I will do this for you to help out your business partner. Like there is that disconnect. So what?
Drug-addled grifter, grifter like brags about his influence.
Right.
It's like, okay,
brags about his dad to get money. Yeah. So what? I mean, okay, Hunter's a piece of shit. Okay, so what? Who cares? You know?
Yeah. What have you seen about the kid? I think they're going to go after the kid pretty hard, and I think it's going to be pretty ugly. Arkansas, the Hunter's daughter.
Oh, his daughter.
In Arkansas, I'm starting to feel like that's going to really be the dark stuff that comes down the pike.
Well, what I'm
smelling.
We've already got like the Newsmax reporters shouting at Joe why he won't acknowledge his granddaughter.
Yeah.
You know, because I think when he was asked how many grandkids he had, he said 6, and so he doesn't count her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much traction.
Yeah. Regardless of the merits, I was just curious if increasingly, you know, that is something that people are bringing up. You know, they
do bring it up, but I mean, so what? He doesn't want to acknowledge that his son got some woman in Arkansas pregnant.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
he's got bigger things on his plate.
All right, brother. Well, do you have any glimmers of hope for us? I want to shut this thing down. Anything that, you know, should make us feel good about Joe Biden reelect, or about, you know, the crazy burning itself out? Like eventually it's got to be like one of those. I'm not an astrologist, so I don't know what kind of stars they are. Like one of those hot stars that just like eventually burns themselves out and become a black hole. Like that's eventually going to happen in this world, right?
I mean, the January 6th indictment in the Georgia indictment, you know, I mean, I know we all talk about it, and I know a lot of Democrats pin all their hopes on the criminal prosecutions, you know, to be the solution, the final answer to Trump. And I feel that the same way too. I mean, I just think like, you have to ignore all the noise, all the crying, all the screaming of election interference from Congress, from the grassroots, from around the country. Because, I mean, what we both know is a lot of those people who are out there publicly, you know, crying about it, secretly, they're happy that Jack Smith and Merrick Garland are going to rid them of their Donald Trump problem. Because think about it as a Republican politician. The ideal scenario is for like DeSantis to be out there railing against Jack Smith and condemning Merrick Garland for these horrible political prosecutions, while at the same time going home and saying, isn't this great? You know, they're taking out Trump for us, because they don't have the guts to stand up to Trump themselves. So they want the Democrats to take him out. That's what they're doing. You know, so the glimmer of hope to me are these criminal prosecutions, which I think will be the end of Trump. I really do.
Well, that's a good place to end it. Ron Filipkowski, it's been such an honor. I'm so happy you decided to send in that video after a few days of rumination. I still feel like I owe your wife one, because had you decided not to send it, you know, maybe you wouldn't be looking both ways when you open the car door in Michael Flynn country. So I'm very grateful. People can follow you, Ron Filipkowski, on Twitter if they don't already, which, you know, I'm sure most folks do. And you know, we'll keep this conversation going with the Kelly Clarkson of Arvat, Ronald Filipkowski. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, appreciate you, man. We'll be back on Wednesday with the next level. I've got a good one coming next Sunday for you as well. So make sure to head back to thebulwark.com, sign up for our newsletters, head over, listen to Charlie on the main feed. I'll be back with him next Friday, and we'll be doing this all over again. Peace.